On SportsRoom today, the week interviews the head coach of Kerala Blasters FC, Eelco Schattorie. The Dutchman is hoping to revive the Blasters squad with his radical plans, and he's brimming with ideas for Indian football. So let's jump right into it. So yeah, congratulations on your historic win recently. You definitely have a strong squad on paper right now, and you've spoken about your injuries and all that. But have you had this many injured players in your squad in your career before, to deal with this side of situation?
Very simple, never. A coach, I'm more than 25-year coach, and there is a certain way of going about how to set up a certain program physically. And unfortunately, because of the pre-season, that was a bit rearranged.
Right.
That is part of it, and also part is just a little bit bad luck. But I never had so many injuries in my life, and I'm very careful for these things. I'm sometimes even a little bit over careful. So I rarely. Last year I had only two injuries in the end of the season, because those two players, Ogbeche and Roland Borges, because they played all the games,
Matches, yes.
but normally I don't have.
So, so what can your team do to cope with these kind of injuries? Because we've seen, we have famous examples of coaches in Europe who they either they change the diet, or they change the training regime, or they change the fitness, strengthening. And is there anything you can do, or is it just out of your hands?
No, in this league it's very, very difficult, because especially the players who had long-term injuries, for them to come back, you cannot give them a platform to slowly get into the games. That means if somebody's long time injured, you give him with the reserve team or a team behind you to give him 2 or 3 games to get into the rhythm. Unfortunately, that's not possible. So you just have to deal with it. We took some risks, and that it is what it is. But I can assure you that I try to fit that puzzle as good as I can. But it's a huge task, that's for sure.
Okay. And you inherited a squad in the summer, and you've almost overhauled it. So how's that working out for you right now?
The thing is that the management did everything they could to make a good squad. All the Indian recruitments was done by the club, and that is not a complaint at all. But there was not one Indian player that I specifically chose. The foreign players, I was involved, 5 of them, 2 were also chosen by the club. But I think this club is really trying to make a transition. We're trying to cooperate. We're trying to work together to get through a new period. But things take time, and I said it so many times before. Anything you want to build take time. Unfortunately, the scoreboard analysis on you win or lose, I do understand that. But look at Manchester United now, for how many years they're trying to get on top, and they still don't reaching it. So there is a dynamic in football that that is sometimes difficult to overcome. This club has a similar thing. 2 years didn't do anything. So there is something at work that you need to get through, and we need a little bit of luck to make it, to speed up that process. But overall, I think the club is doing the right thing, and we're really trying to work together to make it happen.
Okay. So if you see, all coaches and trainers, managers, they have an idea of how football should be played. So if you were to sum up your philosophy of football and how you put it into action for this club, how would you?
I would always say I like to play attacking football. I like to dominate, proactive football. The thing is, also lately, a few comments on Instagram, even on TV, etc., that a lot of back passes to the keeper. That is nonsense. We had the most amount of crosses in the league. You cannot give crosses from your own half. That is one. The quality of the crosses is not that high. And also there's a certain quality that you need in the team to go forward. There are a few players who are still learning that the moment they can play forward, they sometimes play it backwards, and they should, but that has also to do with experience. But my style is always try to dominate, try to go forward. I remember the game against Jamshedpur, where we're 2-0 behind. I took off a defender, only play 3 defenders in the back, you go full out, and we got back to a result. And that, I always try to be dominant and be straightforward.
Okay, so you first arrived in India in 2012, wasn't it? Since then, how has Indian football changed?
I think actually this morning I was thinking about something. I saw an article on, I don't know which one it was, but it says that India is lacking strikers, and even wingers are a little bit underperforming. And I was thinking about why would wingers underperform, because on these positions almost each team has Indians, so they get a lot of playing time. I didn't find the answer yet, to be honest, but overall I think Indian football has grown because the amount of foreigners that came, the quality of the foreigners, to be honest, became better. Because the intensity of the league went up. In the 3 months league is very short, but they had very old foreigners, 36, 37, 38, who hardly played. Now the foreigners mostly, they contribute the whole season, and that will bring also up the level of the Indians. That's logic.
Foreigners also in terms of backroom staff and professionalism and all that.
As a total picture, yes.
Okay. And I remember you once said something on the lines of Indian players. You said they don't have a very good first touch, or something to do with, I think it was unable to think on their feet immediately.
No, it's the creativity that, and that's, for instance, what I just was referring to, like back passes. Indian players, and I really mean this with respect, within the culture. Most people are very polite and follow what your superior says. In football, yes, you have to do what the coach says, but there's a huge part of where you have to find your own solutions. And that part, that has actually developed. I see way more creative players than I saw before. But that's a part where still a lot of, a lot of progress can be made.
And we have often heard of how the Germans and English especially recently, they've had this DNA of football that they're trying to follow. If you were to suggest something like that for India, brought them all the way up, what kind of DNA would you suggest that Indian football as such should follow?
The first one is a mental part. I think that's the most important, is dealing with setback, dealing with criticism. The way I also evaluate my games with the players, I still have to be sometimes a little bit careful in the way I say it, especially to the Indian players. Although I really, from my heart, I prefer always to be straightforward. I mean, when there's a problem, you need to face the problem. You cannot just sugarcoat it and we move on. So the mental part, I think there's still a lot of progress to make. Actually, I go to my own school. That means the Dutch school. We like to be creative. That means take initiative, develop personality. Don't just follow what others said. Sometimes you have to not do what others say and just find your own way, and find a good balance in that. That's something where I say both those things, they could contribute to Indian football.
Okay. So this season there have been setbacks for you. There have been victories as well. Recently there was a big victory, but then those 9 games through which it must have been really really taxing for you, right?
Frustrating, really. I'm not arrogant, but I'm 100% convinced that with the team that we have, if it was be fit from the beginning, I would not be scared to reach the top 4. But yeah, it's the easiest way to compare it is we have 11 games. We played 11 games, and if in 11 games every week, 2 days before the game, I still don't know what the starting 11 is, that's a problem. That means you cannot create cohesion together. And the best way is if you're married for a long time, your wife and you yourself, you know exactly from each other when things are good, when no good, and you know how to find a solution. In football it's no different. Players, they need to create connections. And if those connections continuously changed, especially in the center back position, midfield, that makes it difficult. But people will say, yeah, but you have also other players. Yeah, true, but if every time have to change, it's difficult. Last year at Northeast I had a small squad, but for 80 or 90% I played every time with the same team, and that's why we got the result.
Yeah, I think even some time back Jackson was saying like he's had to have many different midfield partners.
Yeah.
And that must have been like, how did you prep him for that kind of a situation?
No, that is, you have to deal with that, and you can only learn from that, and I think Jackson dealt with that pretty well. He's 18 years old, and if I see how he made mistakes, and yes, he can do better, but for an 18-year-old to deal with that situation is only a huge progression for him for the future, that I'm sure. But it's not easy.
So we have the bright spot of the season for you would obviously be Jackson and Rakib, Rahul, Samuel, all of them youngsters, teenagers and all getting really hitting the ground running under you especially. Would you take credit for that? Would you say that is this something that they naturally...
No, I just look at, for instance, I get a lot of messages why Samuel is not playing or is not starting. If our team would be a little bit more stable, if it would be a little bit more where we had consistency, then Samuel would have get also more time, because young players also, you need to be careful with, if you throw them into a team that is under pressure, you can also kill them. Jackson is a little bit more physical, so I was less scared to put him, but in the end, if you're doing well, you will get your chance. Either you're 19 or you're 37, I don't care. It's about, if a young boy is doing good, he will get his chances.
Right. So youngsters like this, and also we have the Kerala Blasters youth teams. So how are you keeping? Are you involved in any way with these youth teams? Are you giving them any inputs? How to?
Less than I would like to, because in the end I also like to contribute to football, to help. But this part takes up a lot of time, especially in the period where we are now, but especially with the reserves, and I have a few times, of course, talks with the technical director, so I keep in touch with it.
Watch them play?
Till now I was not able. The reserves, yes, the reserve team, but the younger teams not yet, sorry.
And could you share some constructive criticism on maybe the ISL and how things could improve? What would you change if you were, say, in charge? Just some constructive.
I come from Holland, and one of the things is that's the way I grow up, is you call a spade a spade. That means if something's wrong, it's wrong, and no need to sugarcoat or be diplomatic. One of the things for sure, and this is not a negative criticism because I'm sure everybody does his best, but the level of the referees is simply not good enough. That is just too many games are influenced by that.
But what can Indian?
I will give you a very simple example where what I believe already could contribute without even bringing up the level of the referee. If I sometimes, as a coach, during the training, have to be the referee during a game. If I make a decision in the game and a player disagrees, the only thing I will say, yeah, what you want me to do? I saw it like that. This player, he right away will calm down. But if I start doing this, no, you only get more angry. And that's why you see so much emotion. And I know for myself, one of my weaknesses, but I also call it my strength, is when injustice is done to me and I have no way to even a little bit discuss it, it will only get me more angry. And that's the same with players. And I think only on that level, referees could give a little bit more space to discuss things. If you only think, no, I'm right, and go, it will only create more tension. And on the second part is regarding decision making of a referee. Yeah, that is a process. Like as a coach, I have to learn to make certain decisions. The player, but referees also, and on that level, they can also level up. But I have more problem on the emotional part.
Besides referees, anything to do with the scheduling or the length of the league or anything?
For the referees?
No,
no.
for the league as
no,
such.
as I said before, for Indian football itself to grow, they should play more games. But I do understand it has to do, of course, also with finances.
Yeah.
It's not just, you can't just put one or two teams. I understand that, but the rest, no. And yeah, no, I don't have really a criticism
because
towards the league.
For Indian football, there's this huge off-season, right, compared to, say, Europe. Is that a problem? Because the players don't get much football then.
For sure, that has financial reason, but also the weather. I mean, if you start training here in, what is it, June, July, the heat, the rain, so that also makes it difficult. It's not an easy challenge in India.
Okay. And finally, what do you make of the current roadmap of the ISL and the I-League?
I think they made progress, so I hope they can continue that. I also, I think in the next week, or I have a meeting with all the coaches, and I think that's a very positive thing to do, to get the feedback from the people who are actually working on the ground, and take that feedback and try to incorporate that in future endeavors.
Are there any suggestions you were planning to give at the coaches meeting or any? In your mind?
Yes, but these are things, I think they are decent to put them where they belong. I mean, not just for the media.
Okay. Thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best for the rest of the season.
Thanks.